immediately start with the first talk, which is on the evolution of fruit. I know that we all eat our fruit and we don't really always think where it comes from. But as you walk into the grocery store, the produce section of it, there's a rainbow of fresh, sweet, juicy fruit and vegetables just waiting for you to buy them. They come from all over the world in all varieties. And eating these fruits and vegetables has never been easier. We no longer have to wait seasons and seasons for these things to travel all around the world to get to us finally. We no longer have to pick out seeds, spend hours peeling thick skins, or adapt to extremely bitter tastes. The modern day crops no longer resemble what they used to be. So let's look at how some of our fruits and vegetables used to look. Well, peaches, there at the top left, used to be much smaller with almost half of the fruit being the seed. The skin was shiny and the taste was sour, and the skin was also very waxy compared to what the one just next to it is today, which is a soft, juicy, sweet fruit with very small seeds. Our lemons have evolved from fairly ugly and useless to a nice fruit with multiple uses. And these fruit are native to Asia, primarily Northeast India, whereas the peaches came from China. Now the bananas, right below the lemons there, we know and love, and they are quite different from how they used to be. Did you know that bananas had seeds? Well, and a thick, tough skin. Now the taste was also much like starch, very, very starchy and not very nice to eat. And they also came from Southeast Asia. Now they're in the middle. I think you really almost recognize the watermelon immediately, but on the left-hand side, that is what it used to look like. It had very bitter, high-fat seeds, and the fruit in itself had very little sugar in it. And then it also came originally from the southern parts of Africa. Now, right below your watermelons, we had what tomato used to look on the left-hand side. They looked more like the berries that we know today. They were very small and very sour, and they actually came from Central America. Now, on the next slide, you can see how carrots used to look. And they were not even meant to be a vegetable. They were used for medicinal purposes in the past because people did not eat much of the roots of plants in the medieval times. But you can see that throughout times, the carrot has evolved to become orange. And what is very interesting is the orange was chosen of all the colors because of the Netherlands royal house being orange. And they decided it's very nice to keep the carrots being orange, although purple is also actually still available and probably much healthier. Then on your right-hand side, you will also see the corn like it used to be, almost like a grass growing. It doesn't represent anything like the corn that we know today. And that came from Central America. And it was bred through the years. The top one is actually from the 7000s before Christ. And it tasted like very dry, raw potato. And it actually evolved to what we can see at the bottom now, to being 1,000 times bigger, and it is now also available and grown in 69 countries. So why did this change? What made all of this happen? How did human interaction with nature change the fruit? So let's look at this. Right in the beginning, people were hunter-gatherers, and it was a way of living until about 11 to 12,000 years ago. And people would go hunting for animals and foraging for food. And there's researchers that suggest that farming arose among people who had already settled in an area rich with hunting and gathering resources, where they began to establish properties and actually become more or less moving around and everything. And this was then called the Neolithic Revolution. Now, what happened is this stage is people would gather the fruit in the field, and then they would eat it, and they will discard the pips or the seeds right outside where they were living now. They were not moving around anymore. These seeds will start to grow there, And they will suddenly realize that, oh, instead of going to hunt for fruit in the field, there's suddenly fruit growing closer to them. And they will start picking the nicer ones and leaving the bad ones. And actually, those will then be replanted when the pips are eaten. So it was actually a process of recurrent selection of the best genotypes that has that's almost like representing what we are doing in breeding today. So out of this agriculture, cities and civilizations grew, and because crops and animals could not be farmed to meet demand, the global population there was no more food, so the global population rocketed from some 5 million people 10,000 years ago to almost 7 billion today. The farming procedures moved from natural bush, where everything was gathered, to what we have today as planted orchards. The consequences of this is that we now suddenly need crops that can meet the demand of the consumers, and the producers have to produce even higher yields and higher yields with more and more expensive inputs. And the consumers are getting more and more picky about what they want. So what can we do to mitigate this, to ensure that we still have the farmers producing high yields and profitable yields of crops that and fruit that the consumers would like? So we can manipulate the environment, like the water, the plant shape, through pruning and training. We can spray for pests and diseases, and we can also feed the tree and plant them in healthy soil. But we can also measure what we are doing. So we have weather stations, probes, and all kinds of things with what we can see what the environment is doing. On the other hand, we can manipulate the genotype. This is the plant in itself. So how do we do that? There's 4 ways. We can do it through conventional breeding. That's through controlled pollinations. We can do it through transgenics. That's where you take a gene from another species. Sometimes they even use animals, and then you import it into the DNA of this plant, and then you have a new attribute. You can also do it through mutation breeding, which is a natural process because mutations do happen naturally in the field. You can do it through chemical and physical processes. And then you can also do what we call gene editing. That's not bringing in a gene, it's cutting out a defective gene, replacing it with a similar gene on one of the other strands of DNA so that you have that repaired. So for us in breeding, we like to concentrate on cross-pollination, which is a natural way as it was intended in nature. For fruit, we don't like to if not really necessary, to go the genetically modified way, because fruit are deemed to be a nice to have or a luxury, and people will forever go for fruit that they deem to be safe and healthy. And there's unfortunately a perception under most consumers that genetically modified organisms are not healthy or are dangerous. So we do use the cross-pollination route to multiply our crops and to breed them and then plant them out in the field. This is to maximize the long-term global competitiveness of our producers and to get stable genetic potential yield for the farmers. What do we look for? Seedlessness, improved color, improved quality, and changing the ripening time to suit the consumers. And then for the farmers, we look at the cost of producing, the ever-changing climate, the water usage, the land availability for planting crops getting less and less by the day, pollution that is causing problems for us, and then also we have to look at your consumers that says that fruit are being too sweet these days, and then we also have to look after our planet. So what does the future hold in for fruit trees? Now, there's the 4th industrial revolution, and I think for the young people listening today, I don't have to elaborate on what the 4th industrial revolution holds in. I think for an old person like me, it's scary, but I think all our younger people has already embraced everything from AI, robotics, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, and genetic engineering, which we are using currently. There's also quantum computing, so we can use lots of data and other technologies. So what are we looking then in the future for? We heard about obesity, and people are looking towards fruit that are more healthy, so less sugar, more anti-cancer superfruits, plants that takes up less of our environment but bearing more fruit. So what is the trends currently? We are moving away from very huge orchards. There's trends that people are starting to plant their own rooftop gardens or even farms in containers so that everybody has access to safe and fresh fruit and then also vegetables. There's also in some countries automated indoor farms where there's little robots that's doing half of all the work at the super speed. The whole production should also be more efficient. And what's currently happening is that there are almost huge spaces being covered by net houses to have water efficiency and less wind damage. Also glass houses like at the bottom that's all filled with our plants to breed on smaller spaces. And then they are aiming for these very futuristic trees bearing all this fruit on a tree in a pot, or even smaller plantings in an orchard, less space between the trees. There's also robotics and data collection that is helping the researchers, or that can help them in future, like robots picking the vegetables for the vegetable breeders, weed pullers like this little round one at the bottom, drones for spraying, and then farming exoskeletons to help and protect your body when doing heavy lifting, when harvesting and doing your research work. So also finally, there's nanobots. That's very exciting for the future, where pre-immunization and disease eradication can maybe be done by small bots that are then planted or impregnated into the plants, and they can then get rid of many of our diseases possibly. And you can even fit about 3 billion of these nanobots onto a teaspoon. I know this is all very futuristic, but it's work that has been done by many researchers in laboratories investigating the future for us. So really futuristics, we can see that there can be gardens in buildings. So this is what people envisaged. I think we still are very, very spoiled in South Africa with the vast areas around us, and we don't really see this vision for ourselves. But there are parts of Europe and other countries which has a big loss in arable land, and that are aiming towards this, like Japan. They are very big in this city farms. So for the future, does participating in the evolution of fruit sounds like fun? So why don't you become a breeder? You need minimum a qualification, a BSc, a Greek honors in plant breeding, and the subjects that you will need is genetics and or horticulture. And if you don't want to go in fruit and vegetable breeding, you can also do agronomy. Then you can do maize breeding and wheat breeding, and you need a basic knowledge of biometry. Then also what you need to have as a person, the characteristics is you have to work for long hours in the field. You must be inquisitive and innovative. You need to be highly organized, and you can choose between field and laboratory work. Usually breeding is field work, but you will see a talk later on laboratory work that is also needed in this development of the future fruit. What I personally love about agriculture as a space to work in is the diversity and the knowledge that I'm contributing to the well-being of the farmer, to the food security of the world, and then also to put healthy fruit on the consumer's plate, which is then also my family, your family. And so that is what's making me excited about being a breeder. Thank you.